Welcome to episode 18 of Building Blocks with Brennan. Today we're combining two vastly different worlds, and that is the complexity, mathematics, numbers, equations, A plus B equals C world of AI, and the creative, colorful, expressionist world of art. We connect with Ben over at Art AI to learn how he's created one of the first AI art galleries, AI art companies, and as you can see behind me, I'm a customer myself. What's very interesting about our conversation not only is the idea of combining two worlds, and we go into how his customer base formed, how there has been some peaceful yet constructive conversations every time he posts an article or writes about it within the comment section. Two people, I don't say arguing, but having a conversation around, is this truly art? And on the art side of things, thinking that does there have to be a human behind artwork to consider it art, or can it still have a life behind it? And also on the art, on the AI side, saying, does this mean now that AI is being creative? Is this pushing the boundaries? And I think any good business, as you'll hear from many of the entrepreneurs on this podcast or in life in general, is that there always be some conflict when you do something new. And what Ben and his team are doing is really reinventing or kind of rediscovering and re-innovating an industry that hasn't seen much innovation in maybe since the beginning of time. And the biggest innovation is taking humans out of art. And although, if you look back at AI, there's still a lot of humans in regards to the AI process. This is not just a computer program where you say, make me art, and then this algorithm reinvented itself. There were still many man hours. Go over that in the podcast. There are many man hours of creating this algorithm, the trials and tribulations, kind of what has worked, where some challenges were. But it does show that there is a possibility for math to be beautiful. And so mathematicians always find math beautiful, but this is a different way of seeing it, or different way of expressing a formula, I guess you could say. On the AI side, what's very interesting is that in the world of AI, we're many years away from robots taking over the world. And many people agree upon that. AI is still relatively, you could say, dumb compared to what the movies or like Terminator have said it could be. But there has been many times AI has shocked the world. And the first one, maybe the most popular one, is when Garry Kasparov lost a chess game to Deep Blue. Now, some may say that is not really AI because it could be seen more as a brute force attempt to win. But for a conversation's sake, that was considered AI, let's say. Then the next stage was, the AlphaGo, Google's product, defeating the world's best Go player. And that, again, was a shock to the world. That was only a few years ago. But one thing that we'd always talk about every time you speak to someone in the AI world or even the theoretical world of math and kind of how far it can go is that, art always can beat human when there's a set of rules, when there's a game, because computers are good at games. But when it came to art, and this is why our conversation was so interesting, is art can tend to be seen as a little bit more fluid in regards to rules. There are some best practices. There are some mathematical equations for what is considered beautiful, what is not considered beautiful. But you wouldn't really say there's a rule to art. There's more loose guidelines. So that's very interesting. That's what you'll see through the podcast and through any other work Ben has spoken to or written about, or even any shows or people speaking about this whole world of art AI, is that, are we creating beautiful science? Is this something that's really drastically different or kind of pushing the next step? I believe it is. In my world, just doing some work with AI, I never thought we could get to a point where artwork could be created completely computationally, and that's what's been done. So hopefully you guys enjoy this episode, really learn how Ben has been able to develop a whole new business, redefine industry, make his new industry, as well as some of the unique things comes when kind of making a new industry or making a new business. One of my favorite things on his website, and one of my favorite, or I guess you say more unique artwork, is human faces. I find it fun. I find it very interesting, very unique. Some individuals may find it a little more creepy, but it's one of their biggest selling lines. And what's so interesting about it, I find it cool, is because it's a computer making a human face. So it's no real person, but there is some soul to it. But what we speak about as well is that when it comes to creating a new business, there's no book or textbook or article saying, how can you market art based on computer generated faces? That's brand new. So having to learn on a job has been something that's been very exciting, but very interesting to learn from Ben. So hopefully you guys enjoy this episode, learn about a different side of art that might be commonplace in next year's, I think it will, but at the same time, making art much more accessible. Instead of having to buy a one-of-a-kind drawing or one-of-a-kind print that can cost tens of thousands, everyone can have a unique piece just to them. And what's really cool about our AI is every piece you buy is deleted right after, in the sense that this is one of a kind. No more will you get a llama painting from a Marshalls or Michaels, and thousands of people have it. Heck, I have a llama painting behind me, and I know many others. I've been in other houses who have it, but I know going forward, no one will have the same piece of art like the one behind me. And that is why I found their business so interesting, why I found the conversation so interesting, but most importantly, what I think it means for more individuals being able to express themselves in different ways. And also through our podcast, we also learned about a new product he is developing to make everyone able to create a custom AR piece for themselves. So hopefully you guys enjoy this episode, learn a little bit more about AI, learn a little bit more about art, but also check out their website and hopefully spice up your room just like I have. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I guess to start off, Ben, what's your background? What is Art AI, and how'd you get to where you are today?
So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And 3 questions right from the beginning. So Art AI Gallery, we are the world's largest art gallery for artworks that are created by artificial intelligence. And what we do is we use very, very cool technology to train algorithms, many different algorithms that create bespoke pieces of art that are completely created from scratch. That means that there is no human involvement in the creation process other than creating the algorithm itself. And at the end of this process, we're getting different styles of artworks that are not a combination of existing human created art, but are just something that is completely new. Some even call it a new genre of art. And I would argue and say that this is simply another way for us to enhance what we all know as human created art. Definitely not something that comes to replace it, but something that comes to add, and in the future can be used as a tool. And I'm sure that we're going to touch it a bit further as we are progressing in this fascinating discussion. A bit about myself. My name is Ben Kovalis. I'm a co-founder and the CMO of Art AI Gallery. Was always a tech savvy. I always really love technology, and I always was enthusiastic about art. And at October 2018, there was a very interesting news piece about an artwork that was created by artificial intelligence and was sold at an auction that happened on Christie's, October 2018. Maybe some of the listeners heard about it. It was called The Portrait of Edmund the Bellamy. It was created by a group called Obvious. And even though it was not the first ever time that someone created, let's say, a creative piece using artificial intelligence, it was the first time that it was like a bespoke art piece that was sold at an auction. It was sold for $432,000. At the time, NFTs were not really a thing that people spoke about, and it was a really big amount, hefty sum. And a very good friend of mine, Eyal Fisher, who is also the CEO of the company and was doing his PhD in genomical mathematics at Cambridge University at the time, came to me, showed me this basically press release about the sale. And we were both very excited about it. And he told me that he believes that with his knowledge, he will be able to create an algorithm that not only could create way more beautiful art. Of course, that's very subjective, but when you look at the resolution itself and the complexity of the creation, you can actually say, okay, this piece looks way more advanced than other pieces. He said that not only that he could do that, but he could also create this algorithm in a way that will allow us to generate a lot of artworks and therefore not sell them for $400,000, sell them for $100 or even less than that, and basically let anyone have one-of-a-kind AI-generated art piece in their homes. So this idea was really appealing to me, especially as we were already thinking about what can we do together, what type of idea could be really good for opening up a startup company, because this is something that we really wanted to do. And so we are a group of 3 friends, myself, Eyal Fisher, and Guy Chaimovich was another very good friend that at the time was dealing with cybersecurity at quite a popular company in Israel and know a lot about building infrastructures. My knowledge came from the marketing and sales and operations world. I was a VP of sales and marketing at an Israeli high-tech company at the time. I had experience with marketing online, and this is exactly what we needed in order to expose and make as many people as we can know and learn about AI-generated art, because what we wanted to do is to expose this for as many people as we could, not like instead of selling that really expensive art piece to a single person, sell artworks that are affordable and are accessible to as many people as we could. So the premise was, if Eyal can create this algorithm and can create beautiful artworks, we will open up a company, we will open up a store, and we were going to put some time on it. And I think that after about 6 months, we had a running algorithm that was able to create beautiful art pieces that were good enough for us to be satisfied, even hanging them in our houses. And we started basically building ads, building the website, and showing people around, just people that we don't know, see if they're going to be attracted to the idea, and they were. So we understood, okay, we have something here, and people are really attracted to the idea, both of the thing that you can have an original art piece for a price that you could never have before, and the fascinating story behind it. It's mind-blowing. And we had a short conversation before we started the recording, and we spoke a bit about the artwork that is behind you, which is, of course, very complimenting for me. And we also spoke about, well, I wonder how many people are commenting about this artwork and how much time it spends out of your Zoom meetings when you're speaking about something else. And I think that this is really a part of this whole process. So you asked a long question. I gave an even longer answer. I hope that I didn't get too lost in there.
No, that's good. I always like to start off just like an interview, open ended, just to see kind of where it goes from there. And yeah, it's true. This is the art piece I got from your guys' website. And what's really interesting is how you described how you found the business was really similar to how I found your business. I was looking for unique art. I wanted something that was a little bit different. I mean, you can always buy those prints from like any cheap store, but then everyone has it. You're like, oh, you have that llama poster. So do I. So does my mom. It was just everyone had the same thing. And wanting something that was always a little bit unique. I mean, you could always buy prints, but then those are always, as a child, I always thought prints would be very cheap until I realized going to the art world, prints can be hundreds of thousands, can be thousands. It's not just like a photo printed off, which I never knew when I was younger. But then when I came across your website, it was affordable. But also what I like is that it's always a conversation, just because you never really know what it is. I interpret it as something different, and it's a great conversation piece. And during my Zoom meetings, I just got this last week. So even people are like, is that a duck? I see a deer, but it's always a conversation, and it's always like, oh, where'd you get it? What is it? And then you can tell a whole nice story about, well, it was AI created. And then right now, everyone's interested in AI. It's one of those hot things where people are like, what do you mean? Like a robot painted it? I'm like, kind of, but not really. I mean, there's no robot holding a little paintbrush running around a canvas, but a unique story. And I think with art, it's always nice to have something that's unique, and there's a story behind it. It's not just this is a photo of my children, which is always nice to have. Always recommend having that, but it's just something different that can really continue a conversation. But when you're speaking about AI and what is beautiful, I know coming from the science world a little bit, there is like math in beauty. There are things that are considered more beautiful. But when it comes to training an AI or talking about AI, from my understanding is it would be hard to quantify beauty or like numerically to train the AI to say this is better, this is worse. How did that start? Like when you were first generating art, because it's so subjective, how did you know how good it was versus how off it was trying to really not what you consider, I guess, beautiful art? How did that initial discovery go?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because it's so hard to quantify how beautiful an art piece is. But this is exactly what you need to do if you want to train an algorithm. You need to tell him how beautiful it is and really quantify it. And the way to do that, so we have different ways. The process now is quite complicated, but it wasn't as complicated in the beginning. So what we did in the beginning is we used a lot of a group of algorithms that comprises of GANs, generative adversarial networks. For those who are into machine learning, probably this is not a new term for them, but we are using this process in a bit of a different level. But to answer your question, I want to go into the basics of GANs and how they work and how we can use them to quantify how beautiful, and I'm like using like air commas, how beautiful an artwork is. So to do that, you have two different neural networks, which are two different AIs. Let's say that the first AI is the AI Critic. And this AI receives from us millions of art samples that were created by humans. Let's say art samples from the past 1500 years, but some of the times even older than that. And the critic go over this art, and the goal for the critic is to learn about the different artistic elements of the human art that we fed into it. So basically now the quantification process is based on actual samples, actual artworks that this AI is learning about. And the AI is learning about them because in the short future, this AI is going to receive samples from an additional AI. It's AI adversary, which we will call the AI artist. And this AI artist is going to create in the beginning pretty random designs, going to send them over to this AI critic. And the AI critic needs to provide a grade, needs to grade the artworks. And the way that this AI is doing that, and remember, they are both neural networks. So they're both built in a way that's supposed to somehow mimic the way that the human mind works, even though like it's definitely not the same, but it's humanity's attempt into kind of mimicking it in a very basic level. So gets a pretty random design from this AI artist that doesn't really know anything about human art because it never seen any human art before. Only the critic saw human art. Gets this artwork, trying to compare. Okay, if I'm the critic, then I learned about different artistic elements. I saw that there are clouds in the sky. I saw that sky is something that is in the top of the picture usually. I saw what type of color palettes are going along together. I saw that a blur of pixels, it's not something that I ever saw, but kind of more defined characters is something that I saw a lot. And I'm looking for these elements in the picture that I received. And if I don't see any of the elements, I cannot see any similarity to anything that I know before and identify as art sample that I received before, then I'm going to give a very, very low grade. And that's exactly what the critic is doing. And the AI artist receives this low grade and understands, okay, I sent this artwork, I received a low grade from the critic. That means that I done something wrong. That means that I need to correct myself. And the lower the grade that I received is, the higher the corrections, the more the stronger the corrections that I'm going to apply. And this feedback is not necessarily comes with you have a low grade or you have a high grade. Is basically you have a low grade in this and this and this and this and that. Please fix that without any specific instructions, just general, what was lacking or what was bad. And in a process that is called backpropagation, this information is used by the AI artist to change the neural networks, to change the weights. So the next time the artist is sending an artwork, it's going to be a bit more according to what the AI critic wants to see. So without ever seeing any human art, we can still the AI artist can still receive a feedback of a different AI that quantifies it until we reach a stage when it is really hard for the AI critic to identify whether the creation of the AI artist was created by a human or by an AI.
Oh, wow. So that is very interesting. I mean, having some knowledge of neural networks and some AI, the way your network is obviously highly complex and it has to be for art, but it's also very interesting how you explained it. Just being able to use really two of them to critique it and then almost do a Turing test on itself to see, is this a human creation or is this a AI creation? And once it's indistinguishable, you kind of get to a point that is almost passable to the algorithm's point of view, where it's, hey, we have a piece of artwork here. Although with art, one thing when I was looking at your site, especially, that there's different categories. Is there different algorithms for each category? Because I would assume that it would be hard for one algorithm or one AI sequence to figure out, okay, this is cubism. This is like what's expected in this genre. So when you start off, do you start off with one mode of art or one theme of art and then branch out? Or was the AI creating a bunch of different types of artwork? So like one in the realism point of view. I'm not sure my art terms really, but I know there's such a, how did it start off between kind of branching out to different types of artwork?
So in the beginning, it was a single algorithm that we worked really hard on perfecting, and it had very good capabilities, but still limited. And by the way, it's very important to add that everything that we just talked about, the very, let's say, technical process, is just a part of the process, where we have another very interesting part, which is actually taking the responses, taking the activities of our gallery visitors. So that includes yourself as well. And using the data that we receive from the session. So what type of artworks you like, what type of artworks you are adding to your cart, what you purchase, and even what type of artworks you just look at more than other artworks. And we use this information to feed it, to create a loop between the users and the algorithm. So the next generation of artworks that we are creating is going to be more affected by the sentiment of our users. And this is something that you can't really do in the beginning. You need to have kind of a critical mass of traffic into the website, people that are engaging with the art in order to apply that. And that's something that is really, really hard to quantify. It's basically like see what people like, and based on that, just make it better and better and better. And now I'm not going to say more beautiful, you make it more engaging, because in that stage, you can't say more beautiful anymore. It's way too subjective. So for your question, in the beginning, it was a single algorithm, and later on, we started building more and more and more algorithms. And it changes mostly in what type of data you're using as your training data. You're kind of predetermining the direction you want the AI to go, but it stops there. So after you give it a general direction, it's going to go through a training process. It's going into a black box, and you apply the knowledge, and you apply all of the things that you learned in the previous training sessions to make sure that it's going to go smoothly, and that it's going to reach kind of a stage that we know, that we can identify as a very clean, as a very pure stage that can generate beautiful artworks that are very visually appealing. But other than that, at the end of the training session, you're always going to be surprised.
And that's so interesting how you explain it. And you also touched on the business side of things. And that was very interesting. I even used like website traffic to determine what is, I like how you said it. You went from what is pre to what is more engaging, what is getting the click-through rate, what is getting the, I guess, time spent, per picture to see, okay, what is being liked, what is not being not liked, but what is less engaging or less clickable. And I think that's a very unique sense, because a lot of times when I talk to especially individuals within the AI world or the tech world, it's either you have a very tech focus where we're making the best algorithm. This is the 0.1% are, we have 1 million data points versus your 150,000, or you're on the business side where it's the very simple algorithm that, okay, we're just going to market this beautifully, even though it's not that complex. But it seems like you have a combination of the both. You have a very complex algorithm that can create art, which was something I've been hearing this for years, ever since I was like almost a child, that, a robot, I guess they were talking about AI back in time, can never create something beautiful. That's only what humans can do. And then very quickly, AI came to a point that it is getting ability to create something that humans would see as art, see as something that is considered creative. But then you touched a lot on also using the business side of things, which I really like that combination, because typically you only hear one or the other. It's either like, oh, I'm a PhD student, I only care about the math, or it's I'm only business, I only care about the money. And it's nice to see that combination of both for a really unique business. But one thing I noticed is also that when it comes to generating art, there's always a thing of how much to generate versus having 100,000 pieces of artwork on websites. Too many. There's too many choices. You can't scan through. How do you, on the business side, create a release schedule? Do you have a number you release every month, every week, kind of just to keep it unique and creative? Or was there a thought process on how big the gallery should be at any given time?
So it's funny that you presented it this way, because you touched two sides, and then you added a third side, which was the side that I wanted to speak about. You spoke about, being, really about the algorithm or about the AI, speaking about the customer perspective and then the business perspective. And there's another perspective that I think is the most challenging, is the way that you present it to the world. It's not even about the algorithm. It's about more of explaining what you do and trying to get people that are not necessarily very knowledgeable about machine learning and about the capabilities of AI. And the less knowledge that you have, let's say, the more likely you are to be a bit of like afraid or a bit like distant for what the future brings to us using AI. And it is quite challenging to explain to everyone what it really means that to have art is created by robots, how much of it is really created by robots, and how is this connected to the doomsday prophecies that everyone is speaking about of machines taking over the world. So people that are really close with AI know that we're very far away, and know that even though we have an AI that creates art, this AI is not able to do anything without a lot of human interaction. And think about it, throughout the whole process, you can't get anything out of it unless you train it really, really hard on art based on art that was created by humans. And this is your indication. This is your benchmark. This is how you know that you're doing a good job. And you can't perfect it. You can make it even better without the interaction of hundreds of thousands of people that are visiting the gallery. So in a way, the artworks that are created by our machines, by our creative machines, are even more human. And of course, many people will argue, but in a way, they're even more human than artworks that are created by human artists. And this is because, well, what can you do? As an artist, you have your friends, you have the people that you can read maybe the comments about yourself if you're famous online, and then you can, if you want, take this into consideration when creating a new art piece. But never before you had a machine that that based its creativity ongoingly on hundreds of thousands of humans, already after being trained by humans to create new artwork. So this process is very, very human. And even though we say, okay, so we have like a robot that creates a beautiful art piece, this robot is not doing it by itself. This robot is doing it with more help by humans than any other human before.
It's so true how, especially when people think of AI, if you don't know AI, you think it's like you type in a few lines of code and bam, things are created. No one realizes how many months, years of work, and how much physical data you have to collect to train an algorithm. And a lot of times you train the algorithm and it's something's a little off and you're like, this is not going the right direction. It's a lot of editing, fixing. There's probably more time spent to create the first art piece than any other art piece before, just because it's so much time spent. And what's very interesting with the algorithm is that it can start off great, but then depending on how, if you keep training on certain data sets, it could actually go in a complete different direction. So it's almost like a little child. You have to train it and kind of keep it in line to make sure it doesn't go off too far to one direction where you're creating something that isn't truly what it would start out to be. It can really veer off. Has that now? You don't have to touch on this, but has that ever, when you're working on obviously trying to expand, kind of getting more creative things, have you ever went in one direction where you try to create something and you're like, oh, this is not what we expected or completely unique, or not something you're like, this is not something we want to either kind of go farther with? Have you got to a point where you start creating, has there been one algorithm that went a little haywire that you started creating artwork that was too, I'd say not, I mean, too complex, or you thought too out there for humans at all? Or has it been pretty in line?
So we learned that the kind of the weirdest, we're able to get it to create the weirdest creations, the more exciting it can be. Not necessarily people will be very thrilled to buy for themselves a super weird art piece. Many of them will, by the way, including myself. But it's not bad if we get something like, oh wow, that's surprising. We didn't expect this to go like this eccentric. But definitely we had a lot of occasions where we were through the training process and we saw, well, this is not going the right directions. We don't think that these art pieces are engaging enough, colorful enough. They don't really look artistic enough to us. We saw a better performance before, and even though like we applied more advanced technology and a lot of lessons that we learned before, and we were expecting a certain thing, definitely it happened that the result that we received was not good enough, and we needed to start the process all over again. It's something that happens, and it's also connected to the thing you talked about earlier. It's like a baby, like a little child that you teach things, but with a very specific difference. A little child, a human child, it grows, it learns more stuff, it becomes smarter, and you can see the progress. And with an AI, you can teach it a thing the same way that you can teach a child, but it remains a child. It doesn't grow more than that. It's still a child. And if you want to teach it another thing, you teach it another thing like you teach a child. It's not going to learn anything by its own and surprise you one morning. Oh, wow, it's so nice that you learned this. I didn't even ask you to do that. I guess that when we reach that stage, when your AI learns something that you didn't ask it to learn, maybe then we can speak a bit about, what's going to happen if this trend continues. Is this going to be dangerous? But we're definitely not there.
Oh, no, for sure. And I think on one of the artworks that I enjoy, but my partner is not I say as large fan of, is I love the human faces and the human elements you have. I think I find them very unique. I find them very engaging, almost like a old timey faces. My partner thinks they're a little bit too scary or different. But that's the thing with art. There's always different interpretations. And that's actually why we actually stumbled upon this is I like the color. I like a little more engaging, but going through your site, some days I'm like, black and white's interesting. I would never think black. It was just so many. The breadth is so wide. How when you obviously your website is very well done. It's very well categorized as well. I mean, reminds me a lot of a gallery. How did that thought process go through? Did you have a plan of, okay, we're gonna have 5 different lines, 6 different lines, and then from there go more in depth, or was it one of those things that once individuals started purchasing it and you start seeing certain directions, you start categorizing them in certain groups?
A total combination of the two. And it's a long process, and thank you for complimenting the website. We actually launched a completely new design of the website about a week and a half ago. That was something that we worked a lot about for more than half a year. So we're very excited about that. And the different categories and the way that everything is arranged and what we are aiming to create and present on our gallery is a combination of what we knew that we can create and what we thought that people are going to be into. And that side is a lot about getting into the data that is not the AI. Just see what people are searching on the website, what type of categories they want to buy, what, let's say, competitors, and when I'm saying competitors, not other brands that are doing generated artworks, because that does not exist, but other very large and famous brands that are selling home decoration, and what type of categories people are into. So playing with that as well and see what type of categories people are attracted to as well, and knowing that there will always be a difference. And you mentioned the portraits, the faces that we have on our site, and it's always fun to speak about that because this is not something that you're going to see on other websites. It doesn't really make sense for art.com or Fine Art America to have a category of just human faces, regular faces. But when it's created by an AI and it has this unusual look, suddenly it becomes way more appealing. So this does not exist in the, let's say, internet literature. No one knows about that. No one can give you the advice of, if you're creating artworks using AI, you should definitely have a people category. This is just something, the AI generated a lot of them. We found them very fascinating, and we decided, okay, maybe others will as well. Let's put a category out there, and it is one of the more successful and more prominent categories. So a huge combination.
And when you release new artwork, do you release it per line? Like today we're releasing like nature, today we're releasing something else, or is it like every week you have 5 new ones? How does your release schedule work? Is it based on a theme, like similar to an art gallery, like today is our summer theme or a winter collection, or how does that kind of transpose?
So in the beginning, it was simply creating artworks and then curating them. The curation is done by a human artist that is a part of our team, our curator, and just picking the artworks that are going to be uploaded next, and doing that on a daily basis, just uploading more on a daily basis. And after the introduction of the different AI artists, our different algorithms, we were still curating artworks for all of them, just picking artworks from usually almost every artist, and still uploading them, just updating the creations of this specific AI artist on a daily basis, where every AI artist receives several pieces every day. In general, we're introducing a lot every day. But we do have times where we're introducing a lot of specific AI artist artworks, especially when we are introducing a new AI artist. So we bring a whole new collection. And sometimes we do like a summer collection or a fall collection where we're curating something very, very specifically. And if we are taking part in an exhibition or we want to present a specific theme, we're also curating something specifically. So it's like an artist that just really have a huge capacity of creating new artwork that is curating collection same way that a human artist will.
That's so cool. I mean, that's one of the unique things is just being able to have different themes to release, and really, like you say, you have such a good sense of the business world as well as like having a plan behind the AI as well to really make it marketable and kind of really expand the business with that. Obviously, I found it very interesting coming from the business and tech side, but from what I know of the art world, there can be a lot of strong opinions on many different things based on. Have you found some pushback just because some people might say, oh, it's art has to come from this. I'm making it up now, but like art has to come from the soul. AI can't create artwork. Have you found a big pushback, or have you found it the other way that because art is, most people aren't buying $1 million pieces of art with your pricing, it's much more accessible to many individuals. Have you found that that's not really a big pushback just because the average person doesn't really care too much on if it was, they just want a beautiful piece of art?
Of course, yeah. So we stumbled across a lot of pushback, some of it very serious, some of it very funny, and we also have huge support. So in that case, like a very typical, a very usual thing, a phenomena that you find online, but it is also a brand that produces products. I guess that when you're buying your favorite cereal, you don't really going into too much about what people are thinking about it. You can check some reviews and see, people like, I don't know, like the taste, or is it make your hands really dirty or something like that? I don't know. But you don't really see a lot of push from the other side. But when you read about art AI, creating artworks using artificial intelligence, you see like two camps that are speaking with each other, having really fascinating discussions about not only what they think about the product, because the people that buy the product and they receive it, they usually have very, very positive response to say about it, and we also present them on our site, of course. But it's really interesting to see the people that are not yet customers. They're just really intrigued by the idea and like to philosophize about it. And definitely we have people that are for it, and we have people that are against it. And we also see a lot of convincing happening during these discussions. I think that naturally we have a lot of smart and creative people in there. So people that are, digital artists, usually they're very smart and creative people. They're artists, they're creative, but they're also doing it digitally. They're using very complex tools. They know about technology, and sometimes, they have mixed feelings about it. The other side, we have like AI experts and AI enthusiasts from the other side. So really interesting conversations. And it's a very fun experience to view, even if you just read and you don't comment. And we try to just let the discussion happen, let people think what they want to think and learn and hopefully learn as much as they can. So yeah, definitely big part of the operation.
And that's so exciting that with a discussion, obviously it brings interest, brings many people into it, as well as I think you're combining really two different worlds. Typically, I would say the creative side has never really been too connected with the tech side. There's always seen as a, stark difference, especially when you think of like when we used to go to school. It's like, oh, are you a creative or are you an engineer? It was never, are you a creative engineer? That was never something you would ever hear back in the day. And you're really combining
today we know that a good engineer is definitely a creative engineer.
And that's the interesting thing. That's the one thing I always learned, especially doing my MBA, was that like I always thought, and being naive, like, oh, math can't be creative. Until you meet someone who loves math, and you're like, oh, math is highly complex, especially when you get, or if you can go even farther, quantum physics. You talk about creativity, you go into quantum physics. That is all out of this, literally out of this world thinking. But so I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. Really enjoyed the artwork you're doing. When it comes to kind of growing this business, how does it look forward for you? Is it kind of expanding into different mediums, different types of artwork, expanding the artwork, kind of growing the brand? Kind of what are the next steps for you and Art AI? Is there something you could share for the future? Kind of, is there another big launch coming? Anything exciting like that?
Yeah, definitely it is. I'll be happy to. So, advancing into in new mediums, it's a very interesting topic, but we are not near there yet. But we are right now. We already launched a beta version of a new product, a new service, a new AI. It is called Altifly, and it is if Art AI Gallery is more towards the museum experience of purchasing art, but still having it very affordable. Artifly is more, let's say, home decor and more personal about the person that is taking part. And basically, Artifly lets you create your own piece of art using AI, using a creative machine. You go through a process with yourself in which you're answering an interactive and intuitive questionnaire that comes to find out about your personal taste in art and what type of art you love and what type of art you dislike. And when you finish the process, Altifly creates artworks especially for you, which you can then tune. You can then adjust the feed of art that you receive, and based on what you click and tell it that you love, it's going to create more specialized, more specific artworks for you until you discover you actually create the perfect art for yourself that did not exist before. And you can then proceed to purchasing this artwork, hang it around. It's going to be unique for yourself, same that you get with Art AI Gallery, but with the difference of instead of choosing the artwork from the gallery, from the museum, you create the artwork yourself. So more personalized, and for us, this was the next step that we wanted to take. Also, a lot of it based on the feedback that we received and requests that we received, and decided to make it into a whole new user experience.
Oh wow, that is super unique. That was one thing I was always wondering. I was like, wow, this is like, there's, because everyone has their own personal taste. Like, could it be to that point where you can tune your own little algorithm to develop your own artwork? And it seems like you're already there and launching that already, and that is super unique. Because I know so many individuals, especially when it comes to their home decor, there's like a specific theme they have, and a lot of times people make up their own theme. They're like, this is the mental aesthetic. This is how I want my house to look. So being able to develop pieces that fit what they believe as being beautiful to them or beautiful for the room is, I think, a very unique next step that will for sure increase a lot of engagement with on the platform. But thank you so much for your time, and it's been very interesting to hear your story. Also, it's very rare that I get to connect with someone who both has the the tech side knowledge, or at least well understanding to communicate it, and the business side in one package, which is always awesome to hear, always unique to listen, especially with a business that I'm a happy customer of, and now I came across and was able to reach out on LinkedIn. If people want to follow, want to get engaged, want to be a part of kind of Art AI, what's the best place to follow, and what is the website?
So Art AI Gallery, the website is www.artaigallery.com, or you can search us on Facebook. You can search for Art AI, Art and Tech Talks, or simply Art AI Official, and you'll reach us. You'll see all the fascinating discussion. And the recent product that I spoke about, the recent service, is called Artifly. So www.artifly.com, and you can see and you can have a go of this new very newly launched service that allows you to create artworks by yourself as well. And it was definitely a pleasure taking part. I had a lot of fun during this conversation, and I was glad that you contacted me, and I was glad that I didn't miss the message. It's always a pleasure both to speak about someone as enthusiastic about it as myself, and of course speaking with someone that also is a happy collector. So I thank you for that.